Can you first state your name?
Joe Foy.
What was it like growing up in Edgemere?
Edgemere was a nice place.
Do you have any favorite memories?
I remember the theater across the street
Did you ever go to that theater?
all the time.
What has changed in Edgemere?
I think when I was growing up, it was a really close community. It's kind of not like that now.
Was there any shops that were there that you liked to go to?
Well, across the street was the theater, and when I was a kid, I'd go out and cut grass, and we probably made $1 cutting grass. You could go to the movies and get a double feature for $0.25. And I used to go off and like cowboy movies.
What school did you go to?
Edgemere Elementary and Sparrows Point.
Is there anything else that has changed in Edgemere?
Well, I don't know who else that you've interviewed, but at one time where the old school used to sit, there used to be a pig farm. Then they tore this down and put a new building up. That was back in the 30s.
Did you ever go to the farm?
No, I wasn't born yet. I was born in 1941.
Did you go to what shops did you like to go to that were in Edgemere?
Well, give you a little bit of background. I live in the house I was born in. That makes it 76 years that I've lived in the same house. Right up the street from me was the Edgemere Market. And then beside that was a bowling alley, which is where the dollar store is now. You didn't have to leave Edgemere to do anything. It was a close-knit community. You had doctors, lawyers, dentists. You could go to the market and buy your food. You could go next door and go off and have entertainment. And then across the street was Eldridge's, and they called it the Cozy Corner. When we were young, probably 13, 14 years old, it was kind of a hangout where you go over and get a Coke and a soda for probably 10, 15 cents.
Did you have any favorite stores in particular that you would go to all the time?
Eldridge's was one of them. And then the hardware store next to Hughes Memorial Church was another place where we did a lot of shopping. The only thing about Eldridge's across the street was like a mini Walmart. You could go over there, you could get your sodas, you could go off and converse with your friends. You could go in there and buy material. Back then, you didn't go to a store and buy your clothes. Normally your mom would go off and make your own clothes. You could buy material there. Christmas time, it was just like, the store completely changed. You could go downstairs, they had Christmas trees, they had trains down there, the whole 9 yards. I was 7 years old, and the only thing I wanted was a train. And I still have it today, and they bought it over at Eldridge's. And that was back in 1947. I can't do the math, but it's an old train.
So you said you lived in the same house since you were born?
Since I was born. My house will be 100 years old in 2029.
Is there anything else that has changed besides
Well,
the
the community
shops?
has. I mean, it's gotten larger. The front street out here used to be called Long Log Road instead of North Point Road. That's simply because down on the island there was a lot of logging going on when I was younger. But it's a nice community. I had no inkling of moving anywhere else but here.
Is there anything else you would like to talk about that we haven't discussed?
Well, across the street where the bank's at, like I said, that used to be a theater. There was 3 little shops, 2 shops beside the theater There was a bakery at one time, and George the Barber had a shop right beside that. In back of the movies was it wasn't a junkyard, he was a garage mechanic, but he'd go off and tow cars. I don't think anybody really knew about it, but it was just a small place. And then where the 7-Eleven is now, that used to be a Wawa, and before that, it was a gas station, Mobil. Mr. Pete used to own that. Where Maria's is at right now, that used to be a drugstore. After Eldridge's closed up and moved away, there wasn't a drugstore around, and someone opened that place up and made a drugstore out of it. Doc Levy was his name, I think. Like I said, Edgemere was a self-sufficient little community. You didn't have to go down to Sparrows Point to do any of your shopping. You could do everything right here. And like I said, I've lived here all my life, and I've enjoyed it.
What kind of things did you do for fun?
Fun? I had 3 friends that used to live down here on Wells Avenue. My bike was my most favorite thing I had because that's how we got around. And every day after school, we'd meet over here at Stone's Hardware and we'd ride around the community. Used to play mumbly peg. You probably don't even know what that is. You take a penknife and you flip it up and stick it in the ground, and you had certain things you had to go off and do off your fingers, and whoever won or whoever lost used to take a peg about that long, beat it in the ground, then you had to reach down there with your teeth and pull it back out. But it was a lot of fun growing up in Edgemere, it really was. I went here, I'm trying to think, I sent a picture in of my 2nd grade class back in 1949, and I can tell you maybe half of the people that were on it. The rest of them, they've either moved out of the community or passed away. It was a coal fire stove, coal fire furnace. I can remember, I forgot what the janitor's name was, but he used to go off and drag out big barrels of coal during the wintertime to keep the place warm. Mr. Angelo, I remember him. I was a safety in this school. I don't think you have safeties here now, but we used to have a little badge and that wasn't an outfit, but a badge you wore to keep the kids from running across the middle of the road. Mr. Angelo used to be the crossing guard right over here on the side, and he'd go off and make sure the kids got across the street. I was a safety in the school, make sure none of the boys or girls were running. And it was a fun thing to do after school. But I had a lot of good memories, a lot of good friends that I still have friends that I made here in Edgemere, not Edgemere Valley, but Edgemere Elementary, and they carried on through to high school. The high school I went to down in Sparrows Point until the 8th grade. Then they built a new school over here, and we were the first class to go through sophomore to the 12th grade, the last 4 years of your before we graduated. And that was back in 1959. My father worked at Bethlehem Steel. My brother worked at Bethlehem Steel. All 4 of my brother-in-laws worked at Bethlehem Steel. My wife worked at Bethlehem Steel, and I worked at Bethlehem Steel. I worked 40 years down here as a crane operator.
So what was it like when you worked at Bethlehem Steel?
It was a good living, all right? You did your job, you got a paycheck. If you couldn't work at Bethlehem Steel, you couldn't work anywhere because they'd bend over backwards. If you got into trouble, they'd bend over backwards to help you. When I started working down there was 30,000 men working there and women. I walked out of Sparrows Point High School, put an application in, and 4 days later, I was a laborer down the mill, making probably $80 a week compared to the $25 a week I was making before.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
your time.
You're welcome.